What's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we have a lot to talk about here in the cryptocurrency market. We'll, of course, peek over here at the Bitcoin price chart, which had dramatic action throughout the weekend. We'll take a look over there at the altcoin market and Ethereum. And we'll talk about a capitulation post thread that I had posted over here on Twitter throughout the weekend because I didn't make a video yesterday. I hope that you guys had a great Father's Day weekend. But now that a new week is upon us, let's dive into the charts. Now, I have both bullish things and both bearish things that I can present here on the charts. And I'm actually going to present some bullish things. At the same time, one of the elements that I can't forget about is one that for some reason Tether is still not pegged back to $1 after really kind of losing it back there on May 11th. So here we are about 40 days later. For some reason, Tether is still not pegged back to the dollar. I don't know what the underlying meaning of that or impacts that could be or threats that is to the cryptocurrency market. So that still exists. Also, it's been a week since Celsius paused all withdrawals, swaps, and transfers between their accounts. They did just post an update here to the community. It's pretty brief. It doesn't really say much in here. It's been 1 week since we've paused withdrawals, swaps, and transfers. We want our community to know that our objective continues to be stabilizing our liquidity and operations. This process will take time. As it has been a priority since our company's inception, we maintain an open dialogue with regulators and officials. We plan to continue working with regulators and officials regarding this pause and our company's determination to find a resolution. We are pausing our Twitter spaces and AMAs to focus on navigating these unprecedented challenges and seeking to fulfill our responsibilities to our community. Acting in the interest of our community remains our top priority, and we will continue to work around the clock. We are grateful for your continued support, Celsius. So this doesn't really say anything except, hey, we're going to continue to remain silent. We're not going to hold our Twitter spaces or our Ask Me Anythings. Several people have been pointing to where Celsius gets liquidated here on the Bitcoin price chart. The most recent one I've seen is there around $14,000. I'm not sure if it's still at that. It would either be that or lower likely. And people assume that this likely ends with Celsius getting liquidated. And people pointing to ETH liquidations being at $895 for a liquidation cascade from Three Arrows Capital and Celsius and anybody else out there who's dealing with the same issues, because we still don't know all of the fallout from Luna and from UST, who was impacted by that, what has it done to their balance sheets. And then stack on top of that, of course, the stock market has been very unfriendly. No signs of reversals on the stock market. We've got the 10-year treasury yields breaking out. We've got the dollar up high. There's just kind of a world of all of those things. So I wanted to make sure we remembered all of those before we dive into these charts in here. And as we know, Bitcoin was unable to reclaim the 200-week moving average as this week came into a close. So we can look back in here to these previous times. We were able to hold the weekly close on top of it. You can see there's a little messing around down here back in 2015. In the 2018 capitulation, it was able to hold it and bounced off of it. During the C19 sell-off that happened, it did wick down there pretty hard and then recovered, got real close back to it and then recovered it the next week. But that's really the biggest close below the 200-week moving average that we've ever seen happen for Bitcoin in history. So the 200-week moving average did not act as any type of actual support, which, as we pointed over here, there just wasn't any actual real support on the chart for the 200-week moving average anyway. But we have found interesting levels here as Bitcoin did come back down to wick below its 2018 all-time high, and it was able to close the week above the weekly candle closes for the 2018 all-time highs. We'll take this off the screen at this point. We can just kind of see where we're at right in here. Price did wick as low as 17,590. Over here on Bitstamp, and over there on Coinbase, it got as low as 17,567. I'm sure many of you remember this is actually Saturday morning. It was pretty chaotic in there. We can see we have bounced back up a little bit in here. Is there anything to this actual bounce? That's what I'm going to actually talk about a lot in this video. Is there any way that there's the potential that we've actually already seen the bottom come in different aspects of this market? When I wrote this thread over here, diving into capitulation structures over the weekend, I was focusing on Ethereum. And that's the one we're going to focus on today as we talk about this and we talk about capitulations, to say from a chart perspective, right? We went into it, we talked about all the things. You got USDT, you got Luna, you got Terra, UST, you got Three Arrows Capital and Celsius and the stock market and all that good stuff. But we're just going to focus on the chart here. Does this chart show a structure of what an actual bottom could look like? And if that structure has already played out here on Ethereum. Now, One thing to also take notice of is that over the last week, we've been studying a lot on the Bitcoin plus the Ethereum dominance chart right here that I've got on the top, showing how these structures have played out previously. We've been watching it for a year. It's been a head scratcher. Finally, in the last week, we noticed a big, massive move down in the Bitcoin plus Ethereum dominance. And that structurally said, hey, we're going to pause out here at some point for this dominance collapse that's happening here in Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then when we had that big move there over the weekend, boom, it did bounce right where it said it would bounce. And it has now paused out in here. So I find that interesting and confluence to see something like that would happen in there after being so aggressive, and then it did stop where structurally it said it should have. And so the question comes is that a completed capitulation that has happened here on Ethereum, and are we marching our way back up? Time will tell. But I'm going to dive into the structures of how this capitulation ended and the wave count in it to see if we have that same thing happening in Ethereum, which is what I was posting over here on Twitter yesterday morning. So we'll read through this really quick, and then we'll take a look at it on the actual charts. As you may imagine, I've been deep up to my eyeballs in these charts studying capitulations from the past. Of course, for this idea, one would have to assume this is a capitulation event and not the end of the world. But every capitulation feels like the end of the world, and that Ethereum appears to have completed a full capitulation. Zooming in on past endings with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ending, and how Ethereum has been behaving, the most shocking thing would be a full V-bottom recovery with no re-entry, like this capitulation style has done before. Definitely feels weird to say $883 could be it, since everyone is saying just a few dollars lower is where all the liquidations happen for hedge funds, but the count lines up. Lots of macro wildness out there, and we'll see what the stock market does when it opens. But I was watching this closely yesterday with intensity to see if it would bounce, and it did, 21%. So take it for what it is with everything else out there, but definitely interesting. We'll see. And oh yeah, the ETH plus Bitcoin dominance paused here as the structure has in the past. So conceptually, the idea of it is to take a peek at Bitcoin from back in 2017 to see how a capitulation structure can come to an ending in the cryptocurrency market, and applying that to what we see over here with Ethereum. And what we know with Ethereum is that we had kind of our bounces, and then we fell down and went sideways, and this all took place right underneath here, right when that breakdown occurred. And seeing how the capitulation ended for Bitcoin back in here, same thing. After it broke below those levels, hung out in here, then finally went on into its actual capitulation. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually dive into the waves heading down in here, down into capitulation, to see if we can make any sense of that with current price action right now. To say, have we been stretched too far? We know that the weekly RSI throughout the entire market's the most oversold in history, but it doesn't really give us an indicator on like wave counts on what could be the actual bottom. So we'll play with this, we'll dive into this, and see if there's any matching going on in here. And so over here on CoinTrader Pro, I can zoom in on Bitcoin's price chart from 2017, flip us to 30-minute candles in here, and take a peek at what the actual capitulation looked like before it ended up reversing on itself. And we could see the waves that took place, right? So we have our double bounce, and then this is like, in current times, this is like, hey, Luna and UST comes out and collapses on itself, and then finally we go into full-blown capitulation, like we've seen over here with Ethereum, right? And that we've been heading into full-blown capitulation at this point right now. But that we move down with 5 waves down in here, then there's this pause out, and then finally this last final capitulation, this final breakdown that happens in here, which is what we also saw happen over here with Ethereum. We can see the 5 waves taking us down, the pause out, and then finally the last flush that takes place. That's where Bitcoin's breaking through its 2018 all-time high. And then after that, it's a slow and steady march on its way back up, which until this point, Ethereum has been doing now. It's reclaimed that breakdown that took place back there on Saturday. But can we zoom in on this even more and see if we can count it out like we can over here on Bitcoin? And if I use CoinTrader Pro over here, I can actually kind of copy Bitcoin and put it over here on the Ethereum chart to show what that capitulation ending really looked like in here, to see how it paused out, how it worked its way down, what it looked like down in here before it went on into its final flush that happened in here, and then bounced its way out of here. And over here on CoinTrader Pro, it's not reflecting current prices. It says it's $1,073 for Ethereum. It's actually $1,122, which we could see over here, but we could see how the final flush came in, as we did over here for Bitcoin before a big reversal came in. And if you were to say, where is Ethereum right now, if it was following along with that, Ethereum's somewhere like right around in here. It's bounced back up into that prior moment of the final flush in here, as Bitcoin was back in here, and that it seems possible, just from a structure standpoint, that it has already capitulated in here and started marching its way back up. What would say that it's not, right? So if you're going to like stick true to this and say this is how it has to be if it's going to do some type of V bottom recovery coming out of here for Ethereum, what price levels would have to not get crossed? Well, essentially for the V bottom on Ethereum, it just keeps marching up in here with what we've seen happen here and before. And we've already worked out this area right in here. We should just keep on marching. So if Ethereum is to somehow go take out these levels down in here, if it was to lose $1,050, it certainly wouldn't look like a V bottom anymore. It would start looking different from V bottom. But if it's going to continue, like if you see another breakout here and it takes out that top up there at 1,170, it's still following it. But you take out that 1,050, suddenly it's not. So you kind of have a pretty clear format to follow here on saying, is this actually a V-bottom reversal happening here in Ethereum, in which we know most people don't believe it is. I saw a poll conducted the other day. 80% of people still think we're going to crash lower than here, which is even from a sentiment extreme is more sentiment extreme than it was for Bitcoin at 100K when we were in the 60,000s. And how many people believed we were going to go up much higher from there? The sentiment extreme was not even as far as that. And well, as we've learned, just sentiment alone is not enough to say that a bottom is actually in. Barry Silbert even said it feels like we hit max pain and uncertainty in the crypto market. We're buying Bitcoin here. And that's when Bitcoin was like $22,000, went down to 17. But looking in here to see how a capitulation can come to an end, and that was our final flush. And not only that, it hit that $895 that people were claiming was going to be some massive liquidation level. It touched it. It hit it. So what? Did we already liquidate everybody? Did the floor get bought up? Bitcoin and Ethereum dominance paused in here. The collapse in their dominances stopped. And well, we got a bounce that came in on there on Ethereum at just the right time. So I'm pretty intrigued by it. I was watching it really closely as it was happening. Saturday afternoon, I believe, is in the afternoon time here, at least where I live in the United States. I rarely watch things on the 1 minute chart unless I think it's an absolute intense time period. And then boom, Ethereum popped up like 8% in a matter of just a couple of minutes coming off of those lows. So if we have reached the maximum threshold of how far down Ethereum is going to go, we can see what this type of structure would look like coming out of here. There are no new lows that get set in here on this V-bottom reversal out of here. So if it's going to V-bottom, there shouldn't be any new lows, as we see so far over here on Ethereum. So long as there's not new lows getting set in here, I'm going to be intrigued by it. If we start setting a new low and taking out $1,050, I'll question all of it. But so far, it's been acting exactly like that for V-bottom reversal so far, and that we're somewhere right around in here. But if it takes out this level down in here, all bets are off. So interesting to see that wave count happen for Ethereum over there as Bitcoin gets back to its all-time high. Wicks below it, but able to hold the weekly close above the previous all-time high. We'll see what happens here for Bitcoin. One of the interesting things about Bitcoin has been that, we've looked through previous super cycles for Bitcoin and showing that the area of interest would be right back down in here. But obviously, this topping structure has been so unique in regards to Bitcoin's history. But that for a typical correction, pulling back down into this level. And one of the things, too, is if you know from back in March of 2020, when the C19 sell-off happened in here, is that when this big fall happened in here, it wasn't really an actual gap closure that happened over here for Bitcoin to close out the gaps for itself down here in the lower 3,000s. We actually only pulled back to about 3,800, 3,900 rather than closing all gaps. But over here on the gold price chart, it actually perfectly closed that gap out down in there for Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin is measured in gold rather than being measured in US dollars, it was a perfect gap closure that happened over there. So I've occasionally looked back to the gold price chart, the Bitcoin versus gold price chart, to show the confluences that show up on here. And we can also see, from long-term history, the growth of Bitcoin versus gold, of course, massively outperforming gold. But if you align that up with where Bitcoin is now and how this whole correction happened in here for Bitcoin and where you pull back to at the bottom of the bear for Bitcoin versus gold, that's where we've gotten to in here, right? And that Bitcoin versus gold, or the Bitcoin gold price chart, actually did pull back down to that June 2019 high at the same time that all of that happened in there. And then looking at this capitulation structure that happens in here, we have the same thing happening for Bitcoin down in here versus gold as well. So I'm intrigued by that too. The price charts have pulled down so far, it's, more like looking for bottoms at this point. If you believe crypto is crashing into oblivion and going, to zero, well then, no bottom's going to be coming in at all. But from an interesting price perspective, I think it's time to be looking for bottoms coming in here for this market. In addition, for this being the actual real top of Bitcoin permanently, very unique double top structure that would be happening in here, right? And that the only time I've ever seen a structure remotely close to this as being like a local top was Bitcoin back in 2017 when it did something similar to like that, where it had kind of a double top sideways with no retracement coming in here, right? Sideways, and then just kind of a kerplunk that happened in here and then recovered its way back up to go on to set a new high before the real bigger crash came in for Bitcoin. And that structurally, that makes a little bit more sense in here for something like that to be occurring, just based on structurally how it's all played out in here. But we can go back and revisit this fractal too. I know it's everybody's favorite. We followed it for the longest time in the world, started kind of breaking away from it, then suddenly started looking eerily similar to it again. We could see there was still some trickery that happened down in here, right? That would not have indicated that it was the bottom just yet. And there was still one more bigger move down to happen in here. So when we look at these things, we look at these V-bottom reversals, we could see there's no new lows that get set in here. They just keep continuing on marching up higher. And with what's happening here with Ethereum and with Bitcoin is that's what's happening in here, right? But if we start taking out these lows here and suddenly we're not setting new highs anymore, then maybe this starts coming back into play right now, right? But there's kind of a clear line in the sand there on that idea there of saying, hey, look, if we're still following this thing, then we're going to take out these lows in here. Bitcoin's going to go back below, 19,500. Ethereum's going to go below 1,050. And if it goes below 1,050, then it's like, well, hey, wait a minute. Maybe we're just kind of giving our first kind of pause out in here, and that there's still another new low that's going to come in that's really going to shake things up big time. But so long as it's holding this and so long as it's continuing to just march and march and march, there's the real possibility that that could have been the bottom already. But that totally gets broken apart the second any type of new low gets set in here. Because in our V-bottom reversals, that's not what happens. So with the action that we have seen so far at this point, it doesn't rule out any of this at this point. The way this gets ruled out is merely by just continuing to march up and setting new higher highs and new higher lows. But the second a lower low comes into play in here, well, then this becomes a very real possibility back on here. So the thing I'll be watching today and tomorrow is to see if Ethereum continues to keep on marching upward and if we can continue to set new higher highs and new higher lows. And so if Ethereum takes out $1,050, I'll probably scratch this whole idea of what I'm seeing in here. But otherwise, it's looking awfully familiar for what the ending looks like and what the recovery, the beginning of a recovery does look like. So if Ethereum starts setting another new high and gets above 1,170, then oh boy, we're still going, which is precisely what we're looking for in here. But again, take out 1,050, suddenly there's a lower low. That's not what we get in the V-bottom. So this is where my eyes are glued to throughout the rest of the day, and we'll see if it can continue to progress. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, are there other macro headwinds that are holding stronger on the market, like what's going on with USDT still not being pegged to $1? What's going on with Celsius? Are there actual liquidations that are going to happen here? And Three Arrows Capital? And if the stock market's going to go into full-blown plunging mode, right? And is there any fallout from Terra and UST? Those things still absolutely stress me out about what happens with those because I don't have the full understanding of all of them and the risks that there are there in the market from those things. So they still exist. This is all just like kind of looking at charts. And so like if we look at like the altcoin market in general, excluding Bitcoin, excluding Ethereum, if we started seeing a march up in the altcoin market getting back up in here to like $450 billion again, we'll dive into that structure a whole lot more, but this is where I would start getting excited. And we could see we haven't seen any big break happening here in the altcoin market at this point. It's still just hovering down in here. Even though Ethereum and Bitcoin both took big plunges, the altcoin market stayed relatively still during that whole moment, which is why we saw these Ethereum and Bitcoin dominances falling so drastically versus the altcoin market, because the altcoin market was staying pretty still during all of it while they were tanking. But a confluence of those things that we're seeing over there with Ethereum and with Bitcoin are that this did finally stop right where it was supposed to stop in here. And so I'm intrigued to see that stopped at the exact same time, and kind of watching how the market's going to progress right now to see if we can continue to set new higher highs and new higher lows pulling out of here like we have before. So definitely not hooting and hollering and screaming the bottom is in, but I'm showing times where bottoms did come in like that and what happened after the bottom was in. And so far, we have been following along with that. But there are price levels in here, like on Ethereum. If it takes out 1,050, it has then deviated away from what a bottom looked like. So all eyes on this to see if the march can keep on going. So, all right, guys, that'll be it to start off the week. I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. I want to thank you so much for watching my channel. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you could be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.